both Harris and Walz continue to claim they are the middle class party. They are the middle class, the candidates for the middle class, that the Republicans of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance only want to help the richest of the rich. Well, the Teamsters aren't buying it. The head of the Teamsters Union spoke at the RNC. Now, it wasn't a full endorsement of President Trump or Republicans, but an acknowledgement that many of their members were Republican. He did not speak at the DNC, not because he wouldn't, but because they wanted to give him the exact speech he would have to deliver, and he would not do that because he wanted to represent his members. So he wasn't at the DNC, was at the RNC, but no endorsement. Here's the bizarre part in their announcement, which I think, listen, this is a huge win for President Trump, the fact that the Teamsters have put out this information, that the true middle-class Americans in the private sector are supporting President Trump by 60%. The union's extensive member polling, this is why they did not endorse, showed no majority support for Vice President Harris and no universal support for President Trump. So Harris would have just had to get majority support to get their endorsement. Trump would have had to get 100% of support to get the Teamsters endorsement. So they're still extremely afraid of what Democrats might do to working men and women in the middle class if Harris does win, because they've created a double standard to get their endorsement.
What you're seeing play out in this election is the shift away from the Democrat Party, from the middle class that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are so feverishly trying to say anytime they can that they are middle class, because they're also sensing this as well. And Professor Hutchison, when you think about historically, the Democrats loved to say that they were the working man's party, the middle class party, and that the Republicans were just wealthy billionaires trying to not pay their fair share of taxes. But when you see the numbers that come out of the Teamsters polling, and I'm glad that they released their polling data to be transparent as well, even with the caveat that Harris didn't get majority or Trump didn't get universal support within their union, I think that it speaks volumes to where the swing states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and also why Ohio is no longer a swing state. When you talk about middle America, where people are middle class and working class individuals, I think we have seen a shift away from the Democrat Party.
It's important to keep in mind that union leadership is now primarily concentrated where? In Washington, D.C. So most large labor unions, they have their headquarters in Washington, D.C. They traditionally have supported the Democratic Party, but in the past, the Democratic Party used to support the interest of working men and women. And so if you look at Pennsylvania, you will find individuals who are represented by a labor union in the fracking industry. They are leaning toward the Republicans. The same thing is true in Michigan. The auto workers who are losing jobs to the electric vehicle mandate, they are beginning to trend toward the Republicans. And the poll numbers of Teamsters workers suggest a similar phenomena is occurring within the Teamsters Union. This has been a strategic move over the last 20 to 30 years, in part because unions increasingly are led by elites who've been educated at elite universities, and they don't really care what their members think, and they are not really that concerned about the everyday working class interest. People that are experiencing egg prices that have gone up 60%. Gasoline prices have doubled during the Biden-Harris regime. Those things, they are motivating workers to move away from the Democrat Party.
These working men and women realize, all the work that the union does kind of amounts to nothing if everything costs more. So even if they get, if they go in and they can negotiate higher wages, but the gas goes up by $2, the wages aren't matching the inflation.
This news about a non-endorsement but released poll data from the Teamsters, which show 2-to-1 support for President Trump over Kamala Harris by the union members. When you start to look at that and you couple that with what the Fed is doing with that rate cut, they're trying to really help employment. They've been trying to tackle inflation with the high interest rates, but they're bringing it back down. They have been fighting against the policies of the Biden-Harris campaign for 3.5 years now. So when you have that coupled with the laborers of this country that are showing their support for change, and by change, a different person in the White House, I think that it speaks volumes to where we are as a country. The Federal Reserve news on its own isn't something that most people are going to be talking about. It gets wonky. It's cumbersome to talk about how that affects the stock market, how it affects inflation, how it affects all of these things that the Federal Reserve rate affects. But when you take that and have the knowledge that what the Federal Reserve is trying to do is combat negative things they're seeing in the economy to try and make it more prosperous for America. That's the end game with this rate cut, is to try to stave off inflation getting even more out of control, trying to stave off a recession. We don't know what will happen in the coming months as a result of this, but that is what they are doing. They are trying to combat negative indicators in our economy that have been presided over by the Biden-Harris team. Yep. So I think that's really all you need to take away from that, is that while the stock market may go up and Harris will take credit for it, it's in spite of Harris that the Federal Reserve lowered the rate and the stock market rises.
I don't think we've ever seen numbers like this. So if these numbers translate into states like Pennsylvania and other states, then as you go into the Midwest, that's why Harris and the team, they can't feel too confident, even with some of the national polls that show it as a closer race. I think that, again, you always want to campaign like you're down. You always want to campaign like you've got to make up 5%, 10% in every state, in every congressional district, every way to get to those electoral college votes, to get the number you need to become president. So you never want to just sit and say, oh, I'm doing great in these polls, so I'm solid. But the fact is, they're not doing so great in the polls. And it seems like they are losing the support from their core base. While, Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. are out in Phoenix and Las Vegas, so Arizona and Nevada, 2 key states, and they're bringing out people who would not typically come out to a Republican event. So half the crowd doesn't even associate themselves with the Republican Party. It's not that they're always going to vote Republican. It's that this time around, they've seen 4 years of what Harris has done. It's not turning a page. You can't turn a page when you're the vice president for 4 years. You've endorsed those policies. You can say what you might do differently, but for the most part, I haven't heard anything about that. It's just a bunch of words when she goes into any kind of policy question. We never get any answers. And I think the fact that when the Teamsters had the chance, the head of the Teamsters had the chance to speak at the RNC unscripted and couldn't speak at the DNC because you had to use their exact speech, it kind of tells you everything. This is a huge blow to Democrats. It's been since George H.W. Bush that the Teamsters haven't endorsed the Democrats.
In 1988.
Yeah. I mean, this is, again, it's been a very long time.